Well, it's going to be exponential, and it's going to be increasingly more of a problem as more of these low orbiting satellites come on board. I just was at a military conference, and they had a speaker from Texas. I wish I could remember his name. He was an excellent speaker, talking about how many satellites um, are actually up in space, and that it's actually creating a problem up there in the ability to detect our weather and predict our weather. And they actually, within the last week, almost had one satellite collide with another satellite.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I have a treat. I know so many of you have been asking about what can we expect with the galactic cosmic radiation? What about this new 5G? What about just radiation in general? People have been writing, asking about Fukushima. What about the radiation in our lives? Well, today I have some answers for you. Celeste Bishop Solum. She just wrote the book, God's Marvelous Protective Provisions for the Coming Nuclear and Solar Storm Crisis. Now, we talked about the Grand Solar Minimum in depth on this channel, the changes with the decreasing magnetosphere. And here we have a book to follow up on that and explain in depth the ways that you can protect yourself using foods, plants, and vegetables around your house, and things that you can find quite easily in markets. It's called radioprotective vitamins and minerals. And again, just for reference, this is a medical disclaimer. This is not in any way, shape, or form medical advice. This is artistic entertainment.
Yes.
And it's an informative talk. It's more about what we can expect as the sun goes to sleep on its 400-year cycle of the Grand Solar Minimum and the cosmic radiation bombardment, as well as terrestrial sources. We need to keep our bodies healthy. So Celeste, I'm so glad you joined me. Thank you. And, just even talking for the few minutes before we got the interview rolling here, it was just a wealth of information. So I really believe that the information you're going to hear today is going to be something you will not hear other places. And also, before we start, one place to back it up, if you want to go find this in written format and see what Celeste is talking about in a written blog format, shepherdsheart.life. That's SHEPHERDSHEART.LIFE. And that's the blog there. There's a news section inside with written format to discuss some of these same issues, as well as the new book over on climatesun.com and also in your blog, both places. Excellent read. And I'm not even going to explain anymore, Celeste. I'm sorry for talking so much. Here we go. It's your floor. And thanks for coming on. And our health is going to be deteriorated or affected greatly as these cosmic rays come in more and more as the sun goes to its cycle.
So absolutely. And it's important to realize that as the sun goes to sleep and the cosmic rays increase, there's a synergistic effect with 5G with the galactic and cosmic rays. And that basically means that the sum of each of those components is more than when they're combined. So it's actually like a third force. So it's actually doing more harm to us in a synergistic fashion than like a cosmic ray by itself or a galactic ray by itself or 5G by itself. And so that's important to keep in mind as we go through this discussion. So I guess let's start with 5G. Because everyone's getting concerned about it because it's ramping up. There's satellites, like they're planning 24,000 satellites. They've low orbiting. The Doppler weather stations back when I was working with FEMA were turned into microwave towers. So every time you see a cell tower, think microwaves. So we've got a lot of frequency and bad stuff harming our bodies. And so basically we break down electromagnetic waves spectrum into ionizing radiation, which is basically your ultraviolet and X-rays, and non-ionizing radiation, such as your radio frequencies, which includes, your Wi-Fi and your cell phones and your smart meter. And basically, the difference between the two is one is heat and one isn't. And that is a small technicality of why the powers of be say that our smart meters and Wi-Fi's and cell phones are not damaging, because they consider them non-heat forms of electromagnetic radiation. So what are some of the damages that you can get from 5G or your smart meter or your cell phone? So I'm just going to go through really quickly some broad strokes. You can get hypersensitive to it. Back in the 90s, back when I was working in environmental medicine, we had patients that were already becoming electromagnetic sensitive. So around the computer or around the cell phone, they would get symptomatic of having an allergic reaction. And I'll explain that in a minute. There's also diseases such as cancer, neurological disease, reproductive disorders, including sterility, immune dysfunction, genetic damage, cognitive effects. And, if you've ever had one of those moments where you walk in the kitchen and you go, why am I here? That could be because not only the 5G, but also during these waves of like the sun and earth connection, where the plasma is pouring into the earth's atmosphere and produces these effects in us. It can affect our protein and peptides, which basically operate at the cellular level in our bodies. Believe it or not, it can cause kidney damage, and it could cause your kidneys to fail or increased urinary tract infections. It can do developmental effects like autism. These have all been reported in peer-reviewed scientific literature. There's genotoxic effects from radio frequencies, and those include chromosomal instability, altered gene expression, that's your RNA, gene mutations out and out, DNA fragmentation, and DNA structural breaks. So it's very dangerous to our DNA. It also basically impacts our neurons, our lymphocytes, for men, the sperm, our red blood cells, our stem cells, and these are the cells in our body. Our bodies are wonderful, and they're recreating themselves every 8 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks. And so you've got new cells coming on board, and if they live in a clean environment, they develop healthily. If they're exposed to cosmic rays or 5G or whatever, then they get these aberrations and mutations. And we'll be talking a little bit about what you can do about that a little bit later in this conversation.
So yes. Let me ask you a quick question here. So all these psychological behaviors that we're seeing today, where the planet seems to be going absolutely insane. And if you look around anywhere, you just can't look and just, if you're a sentient thinking being, you have to just look around this planet and say, I think we're in an insane asylum at the moment. I mean, how much do you think is, this increased violent behavior and increased psychosis and neurosis and all these things that we're seeing across just schizophrenic behavior? How much of this do you think it has to do with all the increased signal that's been put across this planet over the last 20 years? Because it seems to me, now this is my own opinion here, that it's kind of gone lockstep. The more we get, the more crazy behavior that humans are exhibiting. And now we're coming to 5G here, the ultimate of the ultra. I think it can't roll out or go any higher after the 5G rollout. I would imagine that that's kind of the apex of where we're going, at least in this iteration of technology for the next generation or two. But what do you think about the psychological behavior attributed to any of this new signal that's running through our air around us 24/7?
I think it's probably 80 to 90%. And I've been tracking space weather when we get these waves of solar Earth connection. And it is amazing. Like one day, my phone did not stop ringing all day. I mean, all day, all I did was answer the phone. And when people called, they were compelled to reach out and network, but they didn't know why. They also said that they were feeling depressed or violent themselves, and that they had like brain fog, they couldn't think right. And so I would say about 90%. Also, my email inbox gets flooded during these times. Sometimes the people, have a valid question, and other times they just want to shoot the breeze. So there's almost like a mechanism it triggers in us that we want to connect with other people. And that can either be for a positive thing, or as you mentioned, it can be violence. So we're going to see an increase as this whole scenario plays out.
Yeah, because one of your new articles up here on your site, shepherdsheart.life, lawless climate brings volatility and famine. So, which is first, the chicken and the egg, and really what's the catalyst for the next? As we get in, and especially when, I would say we live in a very stable society at the moment. I know a lot of people on the planet, and that's a generalization, but where we live and the people viewing this particular interview, most of us live in a more stable environment. There's not wars raging around you. There's not starvation, people dropping, having to eat mud pies to stay alive right next to your neighbor, right? Like most of us aren't experiencing something like this. So when I say more of a stable type of environment, what will it turn into when people start fighting for food, or there's less food? And, what's the trigger going to be for that? Because that's really one of the beliefs that I had about 5G is when the famines come and when the food is less available and it's skyrocketing in price, doubling, tripling food prices, some places not available, families, hungry children, they're going to behave very differently. And I think 5G might go into this, crowd control device, so we don't have to use soldiers or army on the street. But, then we come right back into, is it going to be amplified because of what we see in the signal range frequency around us? And that's kind of where, okay, back in the 1600s, perhaps it was at flat level X. But now with all this signal frequency, is it going to be X plus 2 or something, on top of the new equation? Because you're talking about the coupling of effects of the natural effects from galactic cosmic rays from the sun, as well as the nuclear here on the planet, as well as the signal frequencies. So do we have like a X times 3, or how is this going to play out, do you think?
Well, it's going to be exponential, and, it's going to be increasingly more of a problem as more of these low orbiting satellites come on board. I just was at a military conference, and they had a speaker from Texas. I wish I could remember his name. He was an excellent speaker, talking about how many satellites are actually up in space, and that it's actually creating a problem up there in the ability to detect our weather and predict our weather. And they actually, within the last week, almost had one satellite collide with another satellite, not to mention satellites falling on your head. That's another aspect to the whole thing. So I just think that we're going into a day when people need layered protection. You need a lot of protection against what's coming against your body.
Yeah, and if you're struck by a satellite and that's the way you exit this planet from your physical body, that you're struck by a satellite instead of being struck by lightning, I mean, imagine the lottery-esque type of yay, on that. But it's almost a good thing that space has become already so clogged with debris up there that it might be more difficult to launch all this satellite network where they're counting on 10s or 20,000 new satellites. Because if it's too full up there, that's a good thing. I know it's a bad thing, we've space junked everything up, but perhaps, as things work in curious ways, that the complete amount of space junk will actually prevent this rollout of the ultimate system. Wouldn't that be just so apropos that we put too much junk up to prevent the newest system from coming out?
That would be wonderful, but I wouldn't count on it. So, we have to really take their plans seriously And it's not that far that they plan to have these 24,000 satellites up. I think there's a big leap next year in 2020, and I think by 2023 or 2023 that they'll all be up. So it is on our horizon, and so we need to take proactive action and learn. There's a learning curve to everything. And we need to learn about what radiation does to our bodies and then what we can do to mitigate that damage.
Yeah, because I can concur with that, because when I spoke in London over there, when I was giving a presentation about the Grand Solar Minimum, I talked about the timelines of 2023 and 2024. We're going to experience some incredibly very unique planetary geometry where all the gas giants are going to form a perfect square and the Earth will be in the middle of that, being tugged back away from the sun. But the last time we saw this same exact square geometry was back in 79 AD. Like, you literally have to go back almost 2,000 years to find this same planetary, makeup or positioning. And 2023 is exactly when the EU has to have its full rollout of 5G completed. And that will also go right along with the EU Unified Defense Force, and their rapid response highways needed to be complete by 2023. 5G needs to be out by 2023. And it's really quirky how everything is rolling along these same timelines that are going to be rolling into what the Grand Solar Minimum timeline is for the food shortages coming across this planet. So preparing is, an absolute must, a must to get prepared for this. There's so many things happening. It's like, how many fronts can you really start to prepare on?
Well, the good thing with radio protection is that it requires a little bit of research. And of course, if you read the book, it makes it that much easier. But it's mostly things that you have in your home, in your refrigerator, in your kitchen cabinet, and you can be protected. And that gives you one additional layer to increase your health. And there's other things you can do, like some people use radio protective paint. There are radio protective fabrics now that people are actually designing clothes to protect their bodies against these electromagnetic radiation frequencies. And so there's a lot of things coming on board. It's really it is an exciting time to be alive, but it's also very dangerous. Quite frankly, the people that are going to die first in this onslaught of frequencies and radiation are going to be the people that eat fast food or highly processed foods.
And what's the correlation there between the persons who have a different type of diet versus eating the fresh vegetables, a lot of fruits, more homegrown foods, heartier foods, compared to what you're getting? Is it the oils that are inside there, or is it the contaminants that are inside affecting? I'm asking a simple question, the same thing that somebody else is thinking out there while they're listening to us. So do you think you could jump into that just for just a second, and the difference in the quality of foods and the reason that you think the radiation might have a different effect on, factory processed, chemically laden foods versus more natural foods?
Absolutely. So basically, the way that agriculture has always been is that it's real ingredients. It doesn't matter if it's an herb, a spice, a vegetable, a fruit, a carbohydrate, potatoes. You're eating real foods, and many, many, many of those are radioprotective. But when you start going to the fast foods and highly processed foods, there are a lot of products now increasing every day that have absolutely nothing from nature. They are completely synthetic concoctions that they build from the molecules on up. And so what those do to your body is damaging in itself. And then when you add the frequencies and the radiation, like I talked about earlier, that synergistic effect. So that's why those people are going to die first, because there's nothing real in there to protect their bodies from the radiation and the frequencies that are assaulting their body.
Yeah, right. And I wanted to point out in the book that you wrote, Celeste, you had everything listed alphabetically going through all the radioprotective vitamins and minerals. And it's broken into two different types of lists. You had what you're talking about in the front with the plants themselves, and how they protected radiation wise, what types of radiation they're protected from. Because remember, and Celeste, you also broke it down, the different gamma rays, X-rays, you broke down the different types of radiation. So then as you go along and talk about the fruits, vegetables, and different types of minerals and vitamins to put in the body, it almost breaks down into a chart in itself of, which type of, protector would be against which type of the radiation, because not all radiation is the same. We got different animals or radiation out there. So the different types of foods that you would eat to protect from, wow, it's like a Rubik's Cube trying to figure it all out. There's so many possible combinations in there. And that list is incredibly lengthy. It's how many pages is that? About 140, 150 pages of possible combinations to protect from possible combinations of radiation inside there. Well done, well researched. I was, just glued, because I grow moringa oleifera. That's one of my baby plants because it's superfood. I think there's a lot of minerals for, lean times for our bodies. And you even had moringa in there, and I was like, wow, you covered everything.
Well, it is comprehensive, but it is not exhaustive. And I know that I have a global following, and I wanted my readers and followers to be able to find radioprotective plants and minerals in their area and things that they would find. So I tried to hit the spots like India, Taiwan, where you live, Russia, South America, Canada. So I tried to include some herbs, spices, and foods that you would find in those areas so that everybody had an opportunity. And if let's say you absolutely love a particular food, herb, or spice, I would type, and you don't see it in the book, I would type in radioprotective and then your favorite food or herb or spice, and then see if there are any studies. And you don't have to go in depth in the study. It'll say, yes, it's radioprotective, or no, it's not. And so that's pretty easy if it's not in the book.
Yeah, and when you do research, this is just an FYI from my own personal research, because I dig in every day. A PDF search engine will give you much better, higher quality results than going on to just a regular search engine. And if you do, please try to use DuckDuckGo or something that's not tracking you, as well as the amount of filtered information on Google and other places, Yahoo, whatever. It's totally built so the biggest kind of companies get on the front pages, where a PDF search engine will bring up these same reports from universities in just a PDF, and no, there's nothing else there. You don't get images and all this. PDF search engine, the same terms there, and you'll come up with a fully range of peer-reviewed research versus just trying to get on the net and go through and filter through thousands of websites. It'll take you forever to do that.
Also, a good resource is the NIH.gov. And if you go to that's the National Institute of Health, and then type in what you say, radioprotective, and then whatever substance you're looking for, they have a really good collection. But one of my favorites is Greenmed.info. And Sayer G does an incredible job at assembling the cutting edge science in some of these important issues. As a matter of fact, just last week there was a 5G summit, and I learned so much. So he is an excellent resource, and a lot of it is free. You can be a contributor and get some more in-depth reports, but you can look up a substance. Let's say you've got eye problems, you can look up eye problems. You can look up dangerous substances. It's just a wealth of information. So I really highly recommend Greenmed.info. I've been with them, using them as a resource for like 20 years now.
Because I can see these longer term effects. And one of the things is, You know, this grand solar minimum is absolutely going to ruin the economy of the planet. So if you think the supply chain is going to continue in earnest the way it does today, and you're going to get everything delivered just in time to your store for foods, but also medicines, I'm sorry, you're in for an incredibly rude wake-up call in about 6 to 8 months from now is when the large contraction is going to begin. But by the time we're talking about 2023 or 4, there will be almost no economy left on this planet except for regional trading and the uses of cryptocurrency to get things done. But the world you know now will have disappeared pretty much economically into an entirely different kind of fog that's going to reemerge into something else. And these international supply chains and the way that we get our pharmaceuticals delivered into stores, not going to continue the way it does. And I don't know if you agree with that, Celeste.
Absolutely. And that's why I had an urgency. I did not even start this book till like July 1st. And all of a sudden it was like, I really need to do this and I need to get it out fast. So for two reasons. One, because this thing is coming at us like a train at high speed. And also there's a learning curve, and to give people the opportunity to either purchase supplements, foods, whatever they want to do. But more importantly, I really encourage people to grow their own. Just like you, I love to grow my own fruit, vegetables, and radio protection in my own home. Because I know that the supply chain is not going to be there. And the powers that be know that too.